All right, here we go. It's another episode of What's Up here on Eric Earhart's Straight to the Heart with Eric Earhart. Yeah, so we told y'all last week that this is something new. Shari had to drag her in here this time because, you know, this is not her regular gig. She's a mom of many. And she does got all kinds of neat stuff going on in her life, and so trying to get her into the studio to help me with this is a little bit of a challenge sometimes. But she's being a good sport, so I might have to get another partner for What's Up segments. But right now, I've got the one and only lovely Mrs. Shari Earhart. Hey, babe, how you doing?
Applications being accepted for podcast partners.
Yeah. Well, I know this is not your regular gig, not my regular gig, so I appreciate you being a good sport about it. But
we like it.
I know you and the kids try to kind of cheer me on with this. Y'all want me doing it, but when y'all get roped into having to help me do it, it becomes a whole other thing then.
Yeah, because sometimes we're doing other stuff.
I know y'all have a life.
Yeah.
Not a podcast.
Yeah.
I've got a podcast. And I'm trying to have a life.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So good. All right. What's Up? Where we cover whatever we want, really. But I think we're trying to. Are we doing controversial stuff, or are we just doing headlines,
of the day,
or what are we doing?
Questions that we're facing today.
Okay, but I'm saying, is it like contemporary in the news stuff, or is it just controversial stuff, or? It's whatever we want to do.
It's whatever we want to.
It's whatever we want.
Whatever we ask you about.
Whatever you feel like asking me about.
Yeah.
Like when we're driving down the road, it's What's Up.
Yes.
Okay. What's up?
So today's topic is immigration.
Immigration?
Yes.
Just immigration as a generalization?
So a lot of people in my news feed are concerned about the United States response to immigration. Some are angry at what's going on. Some are cheering what's going on about the deportations. And so there are strong opinions on both sides.
Now, of course, you and I, we're Christians. We're not just Christians in some generic sense. We are like Pentecostal, evangelical, Orthodox, conservative, theologically conservative Christians. So our news feed, our social media feed is mostly Christians, because that's that's most of the circles we move in. Though both of us have plenty of friends that are not Christians. The grand majority, obviously, come from some Christian background or some Christian tribe of version of Christianity, and so you're seeing I would say immigration, particularly our government's response to illegal immigration, because that all gets blended in a false way, which I think we should address with your question. But I would say yes, I have friends that take wildly divergent views on how our government should handle illegal immigration, and I would say even legal immigration. But let's deal with that for a minute.
We need to define some terms, though.
Okay, do it.
So there's the government response, and there's the Christian response.
Okay,
and those things get blended together. So we can talk about them separately, and then we can talk about a Christian's response to what the government is doing.
Okay. Yeah.
Because those are three different perspectives.
All right, so let me just Google this. I was going to throw out a number, but why? When I've got a device in my hand that'll Google. So I'm going to Google how much legal immigration the U.S. allows in. Let's see here. I want to look this up because one of the things that I find, and I know you deal with this as well, that people who are against our government's, the current government, people who are more open border minded, that we shouldn't stop anybody from coming in, if they just want to be here and sincerely want to be here, well, we shouldn't stop them, right? So we have friends that just believe that.
Yeah.
And I think it's an emotional response. It's obviously, it's not an empirical response. It's not even a logical response. It's an emotional response. But emotions are real. So, we can't just dismiss that there's a large segment of society that thinks that if people sincerely want to be here, they should just be able to come here, right?
I think that often comes from our perspective as Americans, that we can move cross country without anyone stopping us or checking us at the border of North Carolina before we go into Virginia. We cross that border 3 or 4 times a week freely, and nobody stops us. We could move if we wanted to.
Yeah, we want to treat national borders like we do state borders.
Yeah.
All right, so right now, legal immigrants living in the United States, 50 million. So that legal immigrants get counted in census. They actually count illegals as well. So our 340 million, so far, our nation supposedly has 340 million. So that means there's 290 million citizens, and another 50 million people who are immigrants just living here that are not citizens yet. Okay, so we have, we allow in each year, and I was going to say 2 million, but this it is 2 million, but this breaks it down twice. It breaks it down separately. Okay. So we allow in 2 million lawful, legal immigrants per year.
So that's almost 14% of our total population.
A year.
A year.
A year. It is the highest number, and if y'all believe Google, we have the highest legal immigration in the world. Period. So I want to go ahead and lay this case out right now. The accusations that somehow by sealing our border, protecting our border, securing our border, making people use legal ports of entry at our border, whatever terminology you want to use. So I'm just kind of laying out all the terms for security. Whatever term you want to use. So the people who make the argument that when we secure our border and make people in our country legally, that somehow they're anti-immigrant. Like, so we get accused of being anti-immigrant because we're pro-law and order.
Yeah.
So people we know accuse us of being anti-immigrant. I'm like, what in the world are you talking about? I'm not anti-immigrant. I don't really care. So I don't care what nation you come from. I'm like, I don't care if you're from Zimbabwe or Venezuela or Afghanistan or Uganda or who cares, right? Are you from Iraq or are you from Poland or who cares? Enter legally. That's it. That's the rule. Is enter legally, right? Follow our laws. I'm required to follow our laws. I'll get a ticket if I don't follow our laws, right? If our speeding, our driving laws, I can have my land taken if I don't follow our tax laws. If we don't pay taxes on a piece of land that we don't even live on, it's just woods behind our house, right? That we paid for in full. So we own this land, but if I don't pay my taxes on it, they'll come take my land, right? So
or even if you went into a store through the window instead of through the door, or somebody's house, if you went in through the window.
Yeah, if I decided I was going to visit your house and came through your window instead of knocked on the front door and waited for you to open, I would be arrested for breaking and entering.
Yeah.
That's what it's B&E it's called, right? Anyway, so I want to go ahead and clear this up first. That as far as we go, we have no animosity against any immigrants because of their race, religion, or gender. Like, we don't really care, and we know we're a nation very generous to immigrants the most in the world, 2 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to first set the narrative before we can talk about illegal immigration. We have to dispel the myth that the United States and people like us, conservative Christians, are anti-immigrant. The United States as a country is not only pro-immigration, it's the most pro-immigration country in the world, right? And we as people like that, and we don't advocate for any laws to stop people from legally coming here. I don't think I've ever wrote a letter to a congressman, or even when I was running for Congress, I had no policies trying to stop people from legally coming to our country. Now, let's talk about illegal immigration, and now we're talking about something totally different, right? Mm-hmm. So the illegal immigration, I want to address it from a couple of different standpoints. One is, why do we have so much of it? Just that. Why do we have so much of it? Two, I would say, why do we have such a hard time controlling it? And that's we'll have to unpack that separately. And then three, if we have way more people who want to come here than what we already let in, and we're super generous, what should our policy be when the whole rest of the world wants to come to the freest, most prosperous place in the world? Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
I saw a post on Instagram the other day that said, conservatives claim that the whole world hates America because of our freedom. The truth is the world hates us because we bomb them without notice and whatever, something like that, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, there's some truth in that. I am an anti-war Christian. I'm a veteran. I'm a fifth generation veteran. My son's in boot camp right now. I'm pro serving our nation, but I'm anti-war because most wars we get in are ignorant, stupid. We know it. You can easily discern when they're not necessary, and they seem to serve the purposes of groups and individuals that are not really necessary for our nation's survival. Right.
So I want to sidetrack for just a minute.
Yeah.
How can you be a veteran and be anti-war and send your sons to serve in the military?
Yeah, good question.
Be anti-war.
Yeah. So I'm not naive, right? Mm-hmm. And Jesus made it clear that there's always going to be wars and rumors of war. Like that statement right there. I remember there's this book I read years ago by Vietnam veteran Ralph Caputo called Rumors of War. And it's taken from that verse. The opening, the epilogue of that book has that verse in it, right? And he was a Christian, raised in a Christian home, ended up being a Marine in Vietnam, and all the struggles with the killing and the violence and the dehumanization and stuff. So war is brutal and dehumanizing at its nature. Men and women who are sent to do it end up doing things that violate their own conscience, or watching things done, see things done, or have things done to them that violate their conscience at a very high degree. And they have to unpack that for years. Sometimes they're never able to, called PTSD, right? They have to try to unpack that stuff. But I believe I allowed my son to go off to the military the same reason I have a concealed carry permit. When people often are shocked that I, as a pastor, have a concealed carry permit and I carry a pistol everywhere I go. You have a concealed carry permit, and you have, even as a children's church leader in our church, you have carried a firearm on you. And my answer to people when they're shocked, how can you do that? Why would you do that? And my answer is because I'm a shepherd, and shepherds protect sheep. That's what they do, right? There's a guy, there's a ex Special Forces guy that's got like a training program that he does for churches and others called Sheepdog Response. And he says people like him, people like me are the shepherds, people like him are the sheepdogs, right? They come in and train that. Like there was a shooting in that church Sunday in Wisconsin, Minnesota. Where was that at? That shooting
I can't remember.
was just there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. So I just posted the interview with this guy, so y'all can go on my you can go on my Facebook page and find that video of the interviewing this guy. It's an amazing, really an amazing interview, and he said something pretty profound when they interviewed the security guy. He said, "I'm not a veteran. I've never been in law enforcement." He said, "I've just been on my church's security team." Here it goes. Church security guard speaks out. He said, I've just been on my church's security team for a couple of years. It was Michigan Community Church, yeah. Crosspoint Community Church. He said, I was, I'm not military trained. I've never done anything. He said, I didn't know how I would respond if the gunfire ever started. He said, I just didn't know. He said, but all I knew was that these people at this church are my family. And I've been training all these years to protect them if I ever needed to. Mm-hmm. And he said, when the gunfire started and one of the ladies in the church came running by and he said, what's going on? And she said, there's a man out front with a rifle shooting the church. He said, I always wondered, would I run towards that or would I run away from that? And he said, I ran towards it. And so him and this guy had a shootout with each other through the glass of the lobby, front doors, like our lobby there, right? And the double pane glass, the guy shot at him with his rifle, and the double pane glass in the lobby deflected that guy's bullets. And it's like a scene out of a Hollywood movie. The bullets hit around him on the wall behind him, and then he pulled out his pistol and killed the guy.
Yeah.
And he said, now I got to live with taking this man's life. He said, but more importantly, I get to live with the fact that no one in our church died, no one in my family died, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So why do we have a military? Why do I carry a gun? Why do we send our son? Because my family's worth fighting for. Our home is worth fighting for. Now, one of the questions always comes up is like, yeah, but 9 times out of 10, the American Army goes off and fights places that has nothing to do with protecting your North Carolina. Well, that's kind of true. Maybe. Like, we are isolated with we have 2 oceans protecting us. Mm-hmm. It's an amazing God-given barrier that we have to protect us. But we have an issue, where people all around the world, whether it's that Instagram post is right or not, people all around the world would like to destroy us if they could. And they would like to kill us if they could. You could say it's because of our policies. Well, yeah, maybe. Some people say, well, they hate us because of our freedom. That's hard to explain. That's a statement that's hard to prove true. Mm-hmm. That they hate us because of our freedom. I would say they'd be more easily provable that they hate us because of our prosperity, right? They hate us because of our power, our influence, our wealth. Whether freedom is the thing they hate or not, I think that's hard to prove. But they do hate us for these other things. So we have enemies in the world that hate us. I would say it's also true we create enemies in the world, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the enemies we have in the world right now is China. And people would say, well, why is China an enemy? The same way we would say, well, why is Russia an enemy? Why do you call them an enemy? Why can't they just be a global competitor, which is like what Trump likes to see other nations as, global competitors? Why do we see them as enemies, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to pay attention to the rhetoric of a nation. You have to pay attention to what it's investing into its military, and you have to pay attention to how it's using its intelligence services, right? So the Israelis are good friends. The French are good friends. The British are good friends. They all spy on us, and we spy on them, right? It's kind of like you just want to know what's going on. So if you can eavesdrop on your friends, you do as a nation. So all of our friends eavesdrop on us, and we eavesdrop on them, right? We spy on each other. But none of them are spying on us to try to figure out a way to destroy our power grid. China is. None of them are spying on us in such a way as to figure out how to take out our nuclear weapon sites. Russia is. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So there's a difference between being a global competitor and being someone who's actively planning for the if they have to take you out, right?
Yeah.
So I was noticing you and I went to a pastor's event recently, a luncheon, and I watched everybody. I was armed, as I always am. No one could see that I was armed. I don't flaunt it. I keep it well hidden. And I'd say, as far as I know, there was none of those other pastors, about 20 that were there, are armed. Pastors and their wives, and there's none of them I know, and I know most all of them there pretty closely, carry concealed. And I noticed as I watched the group, because I kept watching the entrances. I don't know if you noticed me, you kept watching the entrances.
I know you always
do. You notice me when I do that?
I know you do. I don't really pay attention.
So if you notice, every time someone moved to those two entrances at the other side of the restaurant, I would just sit and watch. I would sit and watch. I would look up. I would not be distracted by the conversation by the guy beside me or anyone else. I would watch the entrances. You know, I always seat myself to watch the entrances everywhere we go, right? So some people would call that paranoia. I call it being prepared. Because it's as simple as this. If someone does come through the doors and decide that it's going to be a mass shooter incident, I'm just not going to be the guy that's going to try to run out the back door. I'm going to try to get you to run out the back door. I'm going to go after that guy. I did that when I was not a Christian. I did that when I was a sinner. That was the kind of person, a warrior that God had made me to be. It's who I am now, and you know that. But so, so we need vigilant people, shepherds and sheepdogs, to protect the weak, so they don't have to watch the entrances, right? Yeah. So we have ICE and we have Border Patrol doing that for us, right? So one of the things that was interesting, we just had a conversation with some people recently, and one of them was giving us some pushback. They didn't really agree with this assessment, and I was thinking, it's you know, you don't have to agree with me. It's just the truth. So during the Biden administration, illegal immigration from Chinese nationals, almost exclusively military-age males, 19 to 35 years of age, illegally entered the country. About 400,000 of them entered during Biden's administration. Okay? For the whole Obama administration and Trump first administration, for both of them, so that was 8 years for Obama, 4 years for Trump, okay? And then the first 2 years of Biden, so 15 years, I think this study was 15 years, how many Chinese citizens illegally entered the United States? What do you think? 15 years.
I already know the answer.
No, you don't. Did you look it up?
No, you said last night.
I was wrong.
Oh, I don't know then.
Huh?
I don't know.
15,000 in 15 years. Okay. Average 1,000 a year Chinese citizens illegally entering across our southern border.
Okay.
Starting in December of 2021 until December of 2023, or no, March of 2024, I'm sorry. 400,000 entered in under Biden, an increase of 8,000%. And I'm not really great at math, but I know that becomes an exponential number.
Yeah, after 100%.
After 100%, it gets a little exponential, doesn't it?
Yeah.
8,000% increase. He let in 8,000% more in 2.5 years than the previous 15 years and 3 presidents. So the question I was asking, and it's the funny thing is, we were actually sitting with an ICE agent having this dinner, and his wife was disagreeing with us when I was giving this information. And then I went and looked, and on the Department of Homeland Security's, they have a whole page on their website dedicated to just that group that snuck into our country. That they can't find them now. They can't track them down. They mostly disappeared into Chinatown in California. So 400,000 military-age Chinese illegally entered our country in 2 years, a little over 2 years, and ICE can't find them.
Well, we have a China King out here in the country.
Yeah. Oh, they're back.
And there's another China King in another little town just an hour or so from us. They're China Kings all over.
Right.
And where did they come from? We like that they're here. We like that they're here.
I like Chinese immigrants.
But they were suddenly gone when Trump got elected.
Yeah.
They had a family emergency.
That's right. So according to according to Department of Homeland Security's own website, and this isn't under Trump. So the article that's on there, the page that's on there, the date of when this information was put up was May of 2024. Okay. So I know we treat 1 year like it's a million years ago in the 24-hour news cycle. But just 1 year ago in May of 2024, under Biden, the Department of Homeland Security was freaking out about these Chinese men that had got it. They got a whole page on their website about their concerns about it, and the whole page breaks down, which I was telling this young lady at the dinner, and she just was disagreeing with me. The Department of Homeland Security explicitly says that these men, there's no way for them to have left China with a Chinese passport, because you can't just. They don't have a constitution. They're not just free to leave their country like we are. If we want to leave, we can just leave. If you're not under indictment for a crime, or if you're not on a sex registry or something like that, you are free to leave the United States anytime you want. You're not free to leave China anytime you want. And
so she was saying she had she met some people.
Yeah.
In California.
Chinese?
I don't know.
I think they were Hispanic.
Not necessarily.
They were Mexican, yeah.
Just some people who were
here
illegally.
Yes.
And they had been all of their belongings had been taken from them, and they had been given a phone.
Cell phone, yep.
That they were supposed to use to call a phone number and check in periodically, and the people were doing that. These folks that she met, I won't say she was friends with them. I don't know if she was, but they were telling her the process that they had gone through. Everything they brought in was taken, and they were given a phone and then released, and they had to call in, and they were trying to be faithful to do that. And so those kinds of immigrants, I think, are the kind that are really wanting a better life.
Yes.
And they couldn't afford to get a visa or whatever.
Well, let's go back and address that. So
they came in.
Right.
They hope they can stay.
Yes.
So they're trying to do what they're supposed to do by checking in.
They're trying to fill out the right paperwork.
Yeah.
So what Trump's doing, and this is what's frustrating a lot of people. So he's just simply, because what Biden did was abuse the asylum law, right? Mm-hmm. And he really hurt these people by doing this. By allowing everybody to apply for asylum, he was basically, because if you apply for asylum, then you're supposed to be able to go before a judge, and that judge determines whether you qualify for our legal definition of asylum, right? So by doing that, the Biden administration literally just opened the border, as that ICE agent was telling us last night. He's been an ICE agent for, decades, for 17 years, and he said we were not allowed to touch anybody. We were literally just told anybody that comes across the border, just point them to the next facility for them to go there, get their phone, get a piece of paper saying that they have applied for asylum, and then they were just released into our country.
Yeah.
Like, we literally had no border for those 2.5, 3 years of the Biden administration, right? And this ICE agent, who his wife is not anti-immigrant. She's hoping these people can stay, and she's the wife of an ICE agent. But he was saying it was madness. We were not allowed to even protect our own country. We just had to open the border up, right? We just had to let people. We were told to just.
And the ICE agent himself was an immigrant from El Salvador.
Yeah. Or his family was.
They're not anti-immigrant.
No, his family is from El Salvador.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He went to high school. He went back to El Salvador to go to high school.
Yeah.
And came back.
Right.
Now he's a citizen working with
as an ICE agent.
Yeah.
And so anyway, these people are not an anti-immigrant.
No.
He's just saying that we have laws.
Yeah.
And my job is to enforce these laws. And the president wouldn't let us enforce the laws, right? So the question.
So what would a Chinese national do with a phone? I mean, what could anybody do with a phone that they were given?
What I'm not sure the question.
If they were not wanting to check in.
You just throw the phone away. It's a cell phone.
Yeah.
Throw it away. What is it? I'm not sure really what you're asking.
Yeah. So all of these Chinese young men, military age,
yes.
Are they calling and checking in and saying, I'm in
Gates
County, North Carolina?
Homeland Security's website, no.
Okay.
They have disappeared.
Yeah.
Into our country. That's a website. That's the Department of Homeland Security security brief on their website.
And how many?
May of 2024.
How many were there?
400,000. Now I want to put that in perspective.
Tell about the process that you found out.
I want to put that in perspective. 400,000 soldiers is the equivalent of 15 United States Army divisions, right? So more Chinese military-age males are in our country than what we have Army divisions in our whole United States Army and Marine Corps. A division is about 15,000 soldiers, 15 to 20,000 soldiers, right? So more of them have come in, enough of them to come in to equip more Army divisions than our whole Army and Marine Corps.
Wow. What was the journey that they took?
The what?
The journey from China.
Well, so they left China, they flew out of China, and they flew into Venezuela, which is a close partner of China, right? And they had a special immigration camp set up there to receive them. So they flew into the country and then went and checked into this camp. And from that camp, they would then be escorted to the U.S. southern border from Venezuela.
Did they walk?
Cross the Darien the Gap through Panama and then make their way up.
They walked the whole way?
No, they were taking tour buses.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They were paying tens of thousands of dollars, right? And there was a couple of reporters, I think one was Geraldo Rivera, who went down there and tried to go on into that camp. He was down there checking on the refugees in Venezuela that were trying to get to the United States. So he went to a real refugee camp of South Americans that were trying to find coyotes to take them up to America. And he visited some of those places, and they looked like refugee camps, what you would expect a refugee camp look like. He went over to the Chinese exclusive one that had gates up, had walls up, who had buildings built inside of this compound. And he talked to a couple of Chinese outside of it who were well-dressed, and you got to go back and watch the video. But even he, after interviewing him, Geraldo Rivera is as liberal as they get. He was super skeptical of these people that he interviewed. He was like, what? That they're here, they're economic refugees here for asylum? And he said, but you just paid $30,000?
Yeah, so our friend was saying, well, wouldn't it be just like the lowest of Chinese society that they're trying to escape China,
Yeah, the poverty workers.
find a better
China.
life
No.
in the U.S.?
No.
Why wouldn't it be?
Because they can't afford, and their government would never let them leave. Right? So that's a whole other thing. So in China, they're a security state. They're a Marxist security state, right? So in China, your everything, your phone is controlled by your government. Now ours is listened to by our government. I know right now that our CIA and FBI is recording every single thing we're saying. How do we know that? Because Edward Snowden and WikiLeaks told us. So it's provable. It's absolutely known. Now supposedly, even though they're recording everything we're saying, if no foreign national is in the conversation, they can't actually use any of this. But they are recording every single thing you say and your location. Thank you, Edward Snowden, for being a whistleblower and not a traitor. You're a whistleblower. Anyway, so in China, their whole life is tied to their device. So even if they jaywalk, the cameras in their city, in their town, will use facial recognition, and they will automatically have money deducted from their account for a jaywalking fine.
Yeah. Our niece found out in her research, her senior year, that for every Chinese person, there are 2 cameras.
Yes.
Double the number of cameras per capita.
People, right. And it's a nation of 2 billion people.
Everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
1.4 billion, whatever they say.
Yeah.
1.7. So yeah, so that means they have 3.5 billion cameras watching their country.
Yes.
So now you're going to tell me that 400,000 of them could fly to Venezuela secretly and then come into our country? No. So again, I would say to you, go to the Department of Homeland Security's website and look at their own assessment. This was an intelligence operation by the Chinese government, according to our Department of Homeland Security.
Okay, so the government has responsibility.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, the watchdog.
Yes.
The sheepdogs.
Yes. They're supposed to protect their citizens.
Yes. So there's government responsibility, there's Christian responsibility, and there's Christian response to what the government is doing.
Okay.
So government should protect us.
Yes.
What should Christians do when illegal people...
About what?
when people are coming...
Illegally.
Okay.
So, well, Christians are doing and we're doing 2 different things. One is we should have been advocating for our government to enforce our laws. So that was considered to be hateful. That's where the hatefulness come in. If you said, like this ICE agent just told us when we were meeting with them, got together with them not too long ago. As he was saying, they were barred from the president, from the government, from doing their job and enforcing U.S. law. The government was stopping them from enforcing U.S. law. So let's put that in perspective. Let's say that we live in a county that had crooked sheriff's deputies, a crooked sheriff and crooked sheriff's deputies. And those deputies were raping young ladies and are having sex with them. Let's just use that term. Those deputies were having sex with the young ladies using their power. That they were confiscating dope and guns from people in traffic stops and never turning that dope and guns in, but selling them and using them. And the sheriff was looking the other way the whole time. That he knew which houses in the county were drug houses, but would not send his investigators, would not try to stop the drug dealing in those communities, right? would we consider that sheriff a good sheriff and a good sheriff's department, or a corrupt and evil sheriff and corrupt and evil sheriff's department?
We would vote that sheriff out.
Hopefully.
It sounds like we did that.
We did that. And the deputies that were left behind were then swept up by the State Bureau of Investigation, the SBI, came in and arrested his top 5 deputies.
Yep. That happened.
That happened here in our county.
Yes.
So, when a president openly defies the law of the land as prescribed by Congress and refuses to enforce it, making excuses saying that he needed new laws passed by Congress to secure the border, he needed new money appropriated, that there was nothing he could do, that his hands were tied, and yet another president comes in and only tells tells our agencies, ICE, Border Patrol, National Guard, enforce the laws that are already on the books, and then now we have 0 illegal immigration right now, 0. Last month, there were 33 apprehensions on the southern border. 33.
That's like 1 a day.
1 a day. In the last month of the Biden administration, there was 33,000.
Wow.
So that's the difference between a shepherd and a criminal.
Mm-hmm.
The one was protecting the country, using the laws that were designed to protect the country to protect the country. The other one was like that sheriff and sheriff's deputies, was looking the other way and allowing crimes to take place for whatever reason. We could go into that. That'd be a whole other episode we'd have to do. What was the reasoning behind that? But for whatever reason, we know this, that the agents, good agents like we just met with and had dinner with, were barred from enforcing U.S. law and doing their job.
Mm-hmm. So that is the government response.
That's the government's response.
What
so
is
our
the
response, I would say, the Christian
response
was, on one hand, if our government, so let's just say that the current government actually started doing things illegal. I don't know what I mean. Would say it started shooting immigrants at the border.
Mm-hmm.
Then we should hold that government responsible to follow the law. Mm-hmm. The same way we should have held the other administration to follow the law. Mm-hmm. So one response from Christians is to be lawful people, is my point.
Mm-hmm.
The Judeo-Christian ethic is predicated on several items, frugality, generosity, hard work, and lawfulness. Mm-hmm. When de Tocqueville came here and toured the United States, famously, even with slavery and everything in existence, what he found was that America, even then, he considered us to be a great nation, a good nation full of great people, because we were lawful people, because we were religious people. So Christians are lawful people, right? It's just in our nature. Mm-hmm. We're trying to obey God and we try to obey the laws, right? So we're human and we're sinful, and when we fail, we get mocked. No one mocks liberals for being evil and being sinful, right? No one mocks them because they don't pretend to be righteous. So we get mocked whenever we do things wrong because we're supposedly trying to be holier than thou. And we're not trying to be holier than thou. I'm trying to live righteously because I love God. I'm trying to live righteously because I love you. I'm trying to live righteously because I love my children. So those things cause me to want to live righteously. And then on top of that, I want to live righteously because I want my community to be nice. I want my neighborhood to be nice. I want my nation. You see what I'm saying? So, mm-hmm. So Christians are lawful people, and it's an amazing. There's an amazing document that was discovered in Roman antiquities about Christians when Christians were being persecuted and put to death. And this one governor wrote back to was it Nero? I can't remember who he wrote. I don't have time to Google it right now. But so he wrote back to the emperor and said, I'm putting the Christians to death like you ordered, but I really don't understand why you're wanting me to kill them, because they're the most lawful citizens in the republic. Mm-hmm. They obey all our laws.
Lying to no one and being good to all.
And he said, and because they hold as their personal code, right, to lie to none, but be good to everyone, was their personal code, right? Mm-hmm. And so this Roman governor who was burning them at the stake was wondering why we're doing it, because they're my most lawful citizens. And that's the same case in the United States. The Christians in the United States are still the most lawful citizens. You won't go into a Christian neighborhood where they're burning down their businesses, right? Mm-hmm. It ain't happening. They'll defend their business. So one response is lawful, but the other response then is generosity. Because we lie to no one but do good to everyone, right? So this is where another lie comes in. So Christians are the most generous to not only illegal immigrants, but to everyone. 9 out of 10 food banks are Christian. Right? Mm-hmm. 9 out of 10, or 8 out of 10 orphanages are Christian. On and on and on. Just name it. Women's shelter, Christian. Women's battered rescue places, Christian. Right? Immigrant care ministries, Christian, right? So Christians get. There was what election was it? Where it was Romney. Romney gets Obama, 2012, and this big thing got brought up about donations, right? And I think, didn't Biden, Biden ran against Obama in that primary, I think, all the way back then. He did. He ran against him. So Biden was in the Democratic primary when it was Hillary and Obama, and that was 2008, right? Mm-hmm. So famously, this thing came up about charity, giving to charity, right? And so they compared all the Democrat candidates and their charity giving to all the Republican candidates and their charitable giving.
I remember that.
You remember that?
Yes.
And the average Democrat gave 1%. Of all those 6 or 7 candidates, 1%. Biden had given none. Mm-hmm. Right? Obama had given the most at 3%, and the rest of them were less than 1%. And all the Republican candidates had given anywhere from 7 to 12%. And the ones that were Christian had all given at least 10% to charity, right? Mm-hmm. So there's this false narrative that we're not only anti-immigrant, but we're unkind and ungenerous. And it's the exact opposite of what's true.
What I struggle with seeing in social media is my Christian friends who are very generous to immigrants, but they're it seems like they are anti-law and order.
Yes. Well, yeah. Well,
they're so good about helping the illegal immigrant to have basic needs met.
Yeah, so
basic needs while they're here.
So
but they're kind of anti-deportation.
Jordan Peterson says that your personality typing is an 80th percentile predictor of your political leanings, right? And we've seen this in our own church. We've married 20 years, been pastoring, or you and I together for that long, me longer. So it's an interesting thing to watch a person who is liberal at bent get saved and then become quasi-conservative because they become more of a law and order person. Mm-hmm. Right? They become conservative in their own live lives, right? So one of the things I realized was I live conservative, but I'm actually politically libertarian. Mm-hmm. I'm more libertarian than I am conservative politically, mm-hmm. right? Because I want the federal government out of our lives. Mm-hmm. And I don't want them telling gays what to do, and I don't want them telling Christians what to do. But I think those things should be decided at a community level and local level, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't think the federal government should be doing things. So I realized, though I'm ultra conservative in the way I live, I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't cuss, I don't, I don't sleep around. Whatever measure of moral conservatism, mm-hmm. I would probably measure very high in a moral conservatism personally. Mm-hmm. But politically, I'm very libertarian and very liberal towards others. Yeah. Right? Though I'm fiscally conservative in our government spending, right? And I would say I'm conservative in that I want our laws to be just, but I want them enforced justly, right? Mm-hmm. So in Christianity, there's a lot of people who would be flaming liberals, progressives, Marxists, socialists, had they not got saved, because their personality tends towards that. Mm-hmm. So what I find is those people in Christianity that are more predisposed to that, they're mercy gift people. Mm-hmm. They have a high empathy measure, because we use a tool. We give a spiritual gifts test and a personality profile to people to join our church. And so I would say those people probably are very, very high on the scale of empathy and very high on the scale of mercy. Yes. Right? And so, because we see it in families, you get these moms that are high on the empath scale, high on the mercy scale, and they just can't enforce rules against their own children. They can't do it. They won't enforce their own rules against their own children. Yeah. So how are you going to expect them people to really want rules enforced against other people? They don't. They only see that these people need help, right? Mm-hmm. These are the people that see it, to give this silly theological argument, but Jesus was an immigrant. So they're just Christian liberals, right? Now, I don't mean theologically liberal, because that's a whole other bent of Christianity. Right. I mean that they're real Christians, but they're personally liberal in their thinking and personality, right? Was
Jesus really an immigrant, though?
Well, he was as a baby, or his mom was, and Joseph. They went to
another state in the Roman Empire. That's not the same thing as being an immigrant.
Yeah, they went to another province.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And they would have had to been counted there. In fact, no, here, this is a good point. In fact, they had to return because they were they were required to return into their borders so that they could be counted for the census. Mm-hmm. So they were not allowed to remain outside of the borders of their place so that they could be counted for census. Mm-hmm. That's why they returned. Mm-hmm. And they heard that the king had died, right? And they had returned for the count of the census.
So I was reading something recently that was saying, and we've said this a lot of times about a lot of different issues, to put a modern lens
for sure
over any other time period is a lot unfair.
Well, it's really unfair, but let's do this then. Let's use the Old Testament as our model for what Joseph and Mary would have been experiencing, right? Okay. Now, the Old Testament does not take into account that Rome had conquered first Greece, and then Rome conquered Greece, so that Rome controlled all of the known world at that time, right?
Right.
Except for Outer Mongolia and places like that. Yeah. They had even went into India, so they controlled everything. So the Old Testament cannot take that into account. But we can look at the Old Testament and see how other nations treated foreigners that came into their nation, right? Mm-hmm. Mostly they enslaved you.
Yes.
Sometimes they killed you. Mm-hmm. Mostly they enslaved you, or they would expel you. Now the Jews, exclusively the Jews, because of Yahweh, because of Jehovah, because of the mercy of God, the Jews did have rules on how to treat foreigners. Mm-hmm. Now, understand that they were expected to be kind to these people when they enslaved them. They weren't allowed to enslave another Jew, and if they did enslave another Jew, they had to release them on the year Jubilee. Mm-hmm. Right? But foreigners, that didn't apply to them. Right?
So they could be taken as slaves.
Who?
Foreigners.
They not
Jews,
could be.
Jews
you were
could
taken
be.
as a slave.
Okay.
Right? And they would stick it all through your ear to mark you.
Yeah.
But they were just expected to be kind to you and not treat you, evil.
Okay, to be clear, we're not advocating taking illegal immigrants as slaves.
Not saying
not
that the illegal immigrants from Honduras.
No, but
no,
just
no.
to
Wait a minute.
bring down the argument that God had rules about foreigners.
This is my argument against, one of my arguments against illegal immigration. Because I hate it. I hate it on so many levels. I hate it because I used to be a drug dealer, and I knew as a young man where all the illegal drugs came from. They came across our southern border. So I know, and everybody knows, that 80% of our illegal drugs in America come across our border. And if we were to seal that thing like we have, you see the prices, because the market is real. The supply and demand, and the control of supply and demand and controlling wages and prices is a real thing, even in the black market. The black market is still a market. And so if you slow down illegal drugs enough, you cause the prices to go through the roof, which takes it out of the hands of most teenagers. Mm-hmm. When our nation's flooded with illegal drugs, which makes them very cheap, now you have teenagers all across our country that are selling them and using them in their schools. But when cocaine is expensive, when fentanyl is expensive, when these things are expensive, you don't find them in the high schools. You find them only at higher levels being purchased, right? Anyway, because high school kids can't afford them. So illegal immigration brings with it illegal drugs. Now you've heard the story. You just reminded me you weren't here. I thought we were already married, so I got a little confused. So we have the number one employer in our community is a sawmill, a large lumber mill. And that lumber mill at the time was privately owned by a single family in our community. And back in 2003, so when I went to prison in 97, in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, there was no Hispanic illegal labor force there. There was a legal immigrant labor force there from Eastern Europe. Mm-hmm. Because you got to remember, this is 97, and Eastern Europe had only opened up in 91. Mm-hmm. Okay? So by 97, we had this flood of legal work visa Eastern Europeans, mostly young teenage girls, that were flooding here to the Outer Banks, which is a holiday resort area. They were doing summer wages. 20 of them would live in one house where they would all share the rent, and then they would work at all these restaurants at the beach, right? So when I went to prison in 97, no illegal immigration. When I got out in 2001, something had happened, and what it was, our governor had signaled that he was not going to enforce. We did not become a sanctuary state, but he did signal that he was not going to enforce immigration law. And our president was signaling at the time, George W. Bush, right? He was pro illegal immigration because he is a Chamber of Commerce guy, and they were demanding the labor force, right? So when I got out in just 4 years, we went from all this legal Eastern European day labor kind of workers to the whole Outer Banks was flooded with Hispanic, mostly Mexican, but also Honduran, El Salvadoran, Guatemalan, but mostly Mexican. The Outer Banks was flooded. Every restaurant, their cooks, their dishwashers, everything were Mexican. Our sawmill here By 2003, half of the labor force at this sawmill was illegal alien Mexicans. Now, you want to know how I responded to it as a pastor in our community? We fed them. I brought in a dental clinic for them. I brought in a medical clinic for them. I started, we started computer classes for them so that we would come set up banks of computers so that they could email home and they could try to take care of any legal documents they had. So, and I would say to them, and I brought in an interpreter that would interpret my message, and would preach my message. We brought in each week, we had a lady who would come in and out of her trunk of her car. She would sell tamales to them, and she would make whole batches of tamales and sell them to them, and they would feed them. So we cared for these illegal immigrants that worked locally. I went to bat for them because the company that they were working for had them 20 to a house, and a house that was under 1,000 square foot. They'd have them 10, 15, 20 of them in there, living in there, working at the sawmill. So I went to bat for them for that. And this is what I would say to them. I'd say to them, you know, you're breaking our laws here in the United States. I'm not a police officer, I'm a pastor, and I'm going to minister to your needs. But I'm going to keep telling you that you're sinning against God. If you're a follower of the Lord Jesus Christ, He does not approve of you breaking laws. I'm not allowed to go break my nation's laws and then claim some kind of Christian distinctive. So I would say to these people over and over again, I'm not a police officer. I'm not going to turn you in. But you need to go home or go to your embassy in Washington, and you need to file the proper paperwork to get a green card and be here as a worker. Every one of them had illegal green cards. I met the guy, and I think I did turn him in. I can't remember right now. I met the guy. So there was a guy, the coyote, they called him, right? The coyotes. They all had to give their paychecks to him. And then he would take their paychecks, cash their paychecks, distribute back to them their paychecks with a portion taken out of it, right? And he was getting them driver's license, social security cards. He was getting them all these things, right?
Yeah.
He was the one paying their rent to the business, not them. They didn't pay rent. So he took the rent out and paid it to the company, right?
It's such a system of slavery.
This is why I hate
once
illegal immigration.
They sell themselves by
illegal immigration
getting a coyote and promising to pay the coyote.
Just like the Jews were allowed to do, letting in illegals allows our companies to treat these people like slaves. Because our son, they would have to pay our son $15 an hour to wash their dishes. They can pay this illegal alien, $7.50 an hour. They can pay him half as much, right?
In some industries, like the migrant farm workers that move from one harvest area to another, can they have the housing and the transportation, the food, the grocery store.
Remember when all the Haitians were here in North Carolina? They were here illegally.
So the farmer sells them their food and, collects their rent and sells them the gasoline that they need to get back and forth to the field from the house that he owns that they're renting from him. And so they might end up with a little bit of pay. And some farmers, maybe not anymore, but when I was teaching in 2005, I went through some training on this.
Right.
They paid the people in poker chips that represented an amount of money. Right. So they didn't actually have money. If they needed anything, they had to go to the farmer. Yes. And that to me sounds like a plantation.
It is. It is. So illegal immigration, so now the question comes, so back in 1986, I think it was April of 86, I was stationed out in Washington State. We had this nice young platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant Chris Berg. I think Chris at that time was 25 years old. I was 18 years old. And I remember asking him, I said, Sergeant, why are 33,000 of us sitting in Seattle, Washington here, U.S. Army soldiers? I said, I don't see anybody invading Seattle, Washington. I said, but I know that our border, because at that time Reagan was letting a flood in. Every president does it. Every president does it. Reagan was letting a flood of illegals in at the time. And I said, why aren't we down there sealing our border and stopping all the illegal drugs and illegal immigrants coming across? He said, Earhart, he said, both parties like it and they ain't never going to stop it. They're addicted to it. They're addicted to the cheap labor. This 25-year-old staff sergeant in the United States Army back in 1986 already knew the game, right? Mm-hmm. Both parties love the cheap labor, right? And they don't care that it suppresses the wages of U.S. citizens.
Right.
So it's literally designed with two purposes, right? To provide the cheap labor that American companies demand, and then suppress the wages of American workers so that wages don't keep up with inflation. Because if wages ever kept up with inflation, we wouldn't need two worker families anymore, and moms could stay home while dads worked like we did in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, and 70s. So what we did is we made it where inflation outstripped, starting in the late 70s under the Carter administration, started in the Nixon administration, but it just exploded in Carter administration, where inflation greatly outstripped wages, and all of a sudden, moms and dads needed to work. And we've never ever had any politicians, except for Trump, that have been willing to right that by cutting off the spigot to slave labor, because every empire needs slave labor. The Egyptian Empire, the Roman Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Russian Empire, every empire needs slave labor. The Mongol Empire, every empire needs slave labor. The American Empire needs slave labor if it's going to keep wages suppressed. Right? And this sounds like a leftist, now I sound like a progressive. I hate that I sound like what I used to fuss about back in the 80s when I was a young Republican, when I would hear people arguing for higher wages, and they were a bunch of leftists. Until I realized that our government partners with big corporations to suppress wages in America, right? And then they hand out H-1B visas to allow about 30% of our white-collar jobs to be given to Pakistanis, Indians, Chinese, right? Claiming that American youth are not technically proficient for these jobs, right? No, it's that an American youth is going to want $60,000 a year, $80,000 a year, because they got that much debt going to school to be able to do that job, right? Where that Chinese or that Indian will do it for $35,000, $40,000 a year. It's all about suppressed wages, right? So you remember when those Haitians were here? They were here legally. They all had very temporary work visas to come pick where they were doing watermelons. Cantaloupes. Yeah. Watermelons and cantaloupes here in North Carolina. We got to meet them. Just a great group of people here working hard. So the system for them, because even if, so let's say they are required, because the farmer is required to give them federal minimum wage. So it's $7.25 an hour, $7.50 an hour, whatever it is, right? So let's say they work 50, 60, let's say 60 hours a week, because they're probably working 7 days a week. Let's say they're working 60 hours a week, somewhere around there, 8, 10 hours a day. And so out of that, their gross pay, what would their gross pay be? At $7.50 an hour, 60 hours a week.
Let's ask the producer.
About $450, $500 a week. Okay, so $500 a week gross. Now that's you got to take out the federal taxes. You got to take out state taxes, right? So now they're at $380, something like that, gross or net, right? Now they have to pay that housing to that farmer. They got to pay for their food that week. They got to pay for the gas. Now they're all being packed on one old beat up school bus being driven back and forth. But they've all got to contribute $25 a week to the gas. So you got 55 people on that bus contributing $25 a day or whatever it is to get you with me. Mm-hmm. So it's a scam, right? It's a pyramid scheme. So let's just say that that Haitian ends up in his pocket an actual $150 out of $500 a week. Well, Shari, that's 3 months' pay in Haiti.
Right.
So they're willing to do it.
Right.
Because it's 3 months' pay in Haiti.
Right.
And so in 3 months in the United States, only making $150 a week, he can make a whole year's pay back in Haiti, right? Mm-hmm. So it's slave labor. Mm-hmm. It suppresses U.S. wages, right? So I hate illegal immigration. Mm-hmm. It breaks our laws. It makes our law enforcement liars. It makes our government liars. It's wrong to the people who come here legally, immigrate legally. Mm-hmm. It's wrong for Americans who are required to obey American law. And it's wrong to the immigrants who get treated unfairly here. Mm-hmm. And then it's wrong to U.S. citizen workers who have their wages suppressed by that slave labor being here. Mm-hmm. So that's why Christian illegal immigration is wrong. God bless you. We'll see you next time on Straight to the Heart with Eric Earhart and my lovely bride.